On you.
And welcome to episode 18 of the Go Earn It podcast. Joining us today, three-time Big Ten champion, four-time All-American at Michigan State, the East Lansing Strangler. We go back a long ways. Nick, always
Yeah,
good
we're
to
just
see you.
talking
How
about
you
that.
been?
Good, you? Thanks for having
Doing
me.
well. You and I go back almost 20 years, and I've told this story several times. For those that don't know, Scott Cleaver and I did a wrestling show on AM 1570 The Score out of Appleton, Wisconsin. We did a radio show called The Wrestling Room, and our guy, this had to be about 2006, 2007, the guy that we would go to was this stud from Michigan State that was always on the show, Nick Simmons. Nick, here we are. Almost 20 years later. It's incredible.
Now you make me feel old, Shane.
Well, I remember when you made the world team in 2011, we were up on the stage getting ready to do the interview, and I will never forget you looking at me saying, remember when we do those interviews when I was in college? Can you believe this? You're doing the interviews for USA Wrestling. I made the world team. Like, kind of a crazy story.
I mean, 20 years back now, too, especially nowadays compared to what we had when I was in school. Totally different ballgame.
Nick, you were a dominant high school wrestler, 2-11-0. You were a pinning machine. What was it about the pin that drove you?
It's just kind of how we grew up, how we grew up, you know. It's just like, if you get in and off the mat, nothing bad can happen. You know, you can't blame anybody else. You go out there, get the fall, be done. I didn't like playing with the guys anyways. Like a lot of guys, like my brother, he can do the takedown game and do all that. I didn't like to do that. I just wanted to go out there, pin you, torture you, and get off the mat and get on to the next one. It's just kind of how I always was from a kid.
You were 2-11-0. Your brother Andy 2-19-0. You guys combined to go 430-0 in high school. What was your introduction to wrestling?
Our dad was a two-time state champ. He wrestled at Michigan State for a stint, and then moved to Texas with my mom, where me and Andy were born. We actually have a little brother too, who's a state champ. So we have 11 state titles between all four of us.
How would you describe the iron sharpens iron mentality within that household?
Oh, especially with our dad, honestly, it was, and my two younger brothers, 100%. I always did. That's how that's how I developed my style. It's because I wanted to figure out how to hurt my brother would be in the rules of wrestling on top of it. So my dad didn't beat the hell out of me.
When you think about winning 4 state titles in Michigan, what are your most memorable moments in winning those state titles?
Our team state title that we won my sophomore year, Andy's freshman year, was most memorable. And, you know, it's like, you know, anybody that wins team titles, right? Don't matter, you know, like Penn State or whoever's winning team titles, don't matter what level you're at. You can't do that by yourself. You need everybody else to play their part and do what they're supposed to do, you know? So that was better for me and us than us winning 4 times undefeated. We expected to do that, but the team title, it just hits different, you know. And my little brother winning his state title was better in my mind than us doing what we did.
Nick Simmons joining us here on the Go Earn It podcast. You mentioned your dad went to Michigan State. You, of course, went to Michigan State with your brother.
Yep.
Recruiting wise, was it always Michigan State, or you take some other visits? What was that process like?
Took a visit to Indiana. I wanted to go to Minnesota. I wanted to be a Gopher.
Really? Why is that?
Story. They were the ones winning too back then and stuff, you know. They were winning the titles and stuff. I just wanted to be a Gopher. I wanted to wrestle in that atmosphere. You know, I can go on what happened or what didn't happen, but, you know, kind of is what it is right now, but ended up at Michigan State, you know. So, but I wanted to wrestle at Minnesota. And then then we ended up staying close to home, you know, obviously, because it's right around the corner. We grew up 10 miles from Michigan State. Dad wrestled there for a year. And then, you know, I would have loved to wrestle, you know, for Coach Goldman, too, down in Indiana.
What were your first impressions?
I ended up working for him.
Oh, exactly. Full circle. What were your first impressions of Coach Minkle?
Take that back down to him. Yeah. Like, Coach Minkle's from our high school. Like, so we've known him knee high to a duck. Coach Minkle was a state champ in 1967 out of Williamston. So he grew up in our town. My parents are from our town, you know, so we've known Coach for a long time.
What did you like about wrestling for him?
I mean, Coach, just different perspectives, you know, and you know he was an Olympian in Greco and stuff, you know, just different styles, stuff like that, you know, and just pick the brain of somebody that you know that's been there and stuff like that, you know.
What was the kind of influence that your high school coach had on you? Who was that?
Uh, the head coach was actually our dad's head coach. Coached my dad when he was in high school, but my dad also brought in somebody else, like all these kids do now with all these clubs, right? That help get them to the next level because no one wants to listen to dad, even if they're right or not, you know. But my dad ended up bringing in another ex-Michigan State wrestler, you know, that was my dad, about my dad's age, and so he ended up training me and Andy for the whole time. His name is Jeff Tarian. He was with us from middle school all the way through, what we did after the college and the Olympics. He's always our guy.
What made him work?
His mentality, and he was the buffer between us and dad as well. And the way he trained guys and the way he trained us with our conditioning and our wrestling, and to help kind of buffer that of what we needed with my father, and help regulate me and Andy beating the hell out of each other.
Who else did you have at Michigan State?
We had me and Andy. We had
From a
I was on
coaching
the team.
standpoint. From a coaching
Oh,
standpoint.
Roger Chandler, who's there now, Chris Williams. He was there when I was there as well. Chris grew up right down the road. We grew up with Chris. Chris, 4 years older than me. He's kind of like a big brother anyway. So all those guys, the guys that are still there.
What kind of impact did they have on you, Nick, in your wrestling?
Like I say, we grew up with Chris, so just the trust we had with Chris and stuff, and then getting to know Roger. Roger helped me figure out a couple of my tricks on top too that I like to do and stuff, and how I kind of ride, and because he was a big top wrestler too, and he was mean as dirt as well. So just a couple of things I picked up from him. I was really close with him too. I was at Roger's house all the time. I'd babysit his girls.
East Lansing Strangler, where'd that come from?
Freaking Scott Casper.
Really?
Yeah.
When did that come about? You remember that? I mean, what was the scene?
I think it was, if I remember correctly, I think it was after Midlands my freshman year. I think it was after Midlands my freshman year, after I took third.
And give me that stat, Nick. It's one of my favorite stats that we've talked about. Give me the stat again with you at the Midlands.
So I won my sophomore, junior, and senior year without giving up a single point. The only point I gave up in 3 years at Midlands was a penalty point. A BS penalty point, by the way. My brother asked the ref after. He goes, "How are you going to hit him for a penalty point? He wasn't doing anything." He goes, "That's the only point he's gave up in 3 years." He goes, "Well, if I'd known that, I wouldn't have done it."
What do you remember from those runs at the Midlands?
That, especially going in my senior year, but not giving up a point, Midlands was tough. With Iowa guys there and everybody else that was there, I remember wrestling guys, like Grant Nakamura in the finals. I wrestled Jimmy Kennedy in the finals. Guys like, Midlands was fun. I loved Midlands tournament. I love going to it. I love watching it. I love competing in it. Just tough wrestling. Michigan used to go to it too, and I think they did this last year, but it was just tough. It was a tournament to go to.
What was your mentality like in college? How would you describe, looking back on your college career, what was your mentality?
Just to dominate. I wanted to be the show. I want you to watch me. Whether you like me or not, I just want to be the show. So did I lose you? No, sorry.
No.
Spam call was coming in. We're entertainers too, the wrestling guys, you're entertainers. You're in the national finals, you're an entertainer. Make it exciting. Go out there, score, whatever happens, happens. But I know if we're going to go out there and let it happen and score, you better score more than me, because I know I'm going to score a boatload.
You watch
That's
the
my.
national
If you
tournament?
think you're going to score 10 points, you better score 15 because I know I'm scoring 15 if you're scoring 10.
You watched the national tournament last week?
Oh yeah, I was there 10 rows up. Dead
What are your
center.
thoughts? What were your thoughts on the tournament? What stood out to you?
I mean, I wasn't a real big fan of the 3-point takedown and some of the stuff going on. I mean, would I have loved it when I was wrestling? Of course. Especially a 4-point near fall. Are you kidding me? But I mean, stuff happens, and I get kind of what's going on with all these stall calls and stuff, but we guys just wrestle to score instead of wrestling to keep it close or win. If you score points, that's the thing. If you take me down, you better take me down a hell of a lot more because I know I'm still going to score my points no matter what, even if I give up one takedown. And that's how I approach stuff. That's how I approach stuff with my youth club and stuff. I'm like, I don't care how many times they're going to take you down. We're going to win on top. You can separate yourself on the mat, top and bottom. Anybody can wrestle on their feet, keep it close. A lot of guys do, and whatever tournament, Big Tens, MAC, Big 12s, guys will try to keep it close, especially if they know, depending who you're wrestling, right? Like you're wrestling a guy like Carter Strachey or Aaron Brooks or 4-timers, you can try to keep it close as you can and steal it at the end, but you're going to separate yourself on the mat too, because you're not going to take down on me, and I know I'm going to turn you.
You were so dominant in the top position. I mean, you're one of the best guys I can remember in the last, 25 years that I've been paying attention to college wrestling. What did you do to really pull yourself away from the pack in the top position? Like, what kind of drills did you do, Nick? Did you do rope climbing? Like, why were you so good? I know it's a mentality, but what did you do to be so good on top?
It was just the mentality, it was instilled to me when I was a kid and how I grew up. It had nothing to do with like like the rope climbing or stuff like that. Yeah, it helps, your grip strength helps, but my mentality, I will take a stall call before I let go of you. I will get on top and I'm going to choose top and I'm going to turn you. Like I'm not just going to be on top to be on top. If I'm working on top, the last thing you're trying to figure out is how to get away. You're trying to survive. I want you to survive. That's what I want your mentality on bottom to be. It's not about so much what I'm doing. You're so worried about what I'm doing, you're not thinking about exactly how to get out. And that's the mentality that I try to preach to all my youth kids and stuff, and my high school kids and some of these guys, because I think I had like 8 or 9 at the NCAA. Don't worry about I want him to worry about what I'm doing, not the other way around. I'm going to get to whatever I'm going to get to.
What's the best trick or two in the top position? Give me something. I mean, what's something on the top that's so critical from a technique standpoint?
Not reaching down, grabbing hands. The hand, like spiral, the hand that's down on the thigh, that's all decoy hand. That's how you get cross wrist. Don't reach down. You always peel top hands. Guys want to reach down and peel hands. That's how they get in the wrist ties a lot. Don't ever reach down.
Growing up, did you have a favorite top wrestler?
Top wrestler?
Yeah.
It would have had to been Shalis, Wade, because he was unorthodox and Spladles, and I love Spladles, obviously. Like Mendez hitting that, I thought it was freaking fantastic. It was great. I had everyone around me that was like, dude, Simmons. I'm like, oh, I know. Trust me, I'm watching.
I was going to ask you about that. Move of the tournament for you, of course, I'm sure.
Oh, 100%. Especially in the moment he was in, too. And because Mendez doesn't wrestle like that. That's probably the only time the dude's ever hit it in his life. But it's there.
How many of those did you hit?
Enough.
Okay, so that was one of your go-tos.
Semifinals at Worlds was probably the most famous one.
Yes. Yep, exactly.
I saw that. Excuse me. I think that was third round at Worlds. Excuse me. Not semifinals.
Watching
the head ref, they didn't see that stuff out there. The head referee came down from the head table, grabbed the paddle and put it up because the other refs wouldn't confirm it with the mat ref. So he actually came down and pulled it up and called the fall. Yeah.
Watching the national tournament, who are 2 of your 3 favorite guys to watch in college wrestling these days?
Well, obviously my guys, that I've trained and stuff and come through my club, but someone that I'm like not familiar with, like the Swiderski, Braden Davis, Fish, Amines, all those dudes. But I like watching Messenbrink wrestle. Dude's just a goer.
Entertaining, scores points, lets it rip, not afraid to
And
be
he don't get tired. He just keeps coming. It's entertaining to watch. He's one of mine. And at the tournament, I don't, Rick, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but the Ohio kid. He was fun to watch wrestle too.
Peyton Keller.
Yeah, he was fun to watch wrestle too.
Couple pins, I believe, for him.
Yeah, just, he lets it go and he rolls and he figures it out and you don't know what he's going to do.
I have not talked to you in a while, Mick. I'm going to ask you this question. Give me the breakdown of Nick Simmons in his prime versus Spencer Lee in his prime. How does that match go?
You're going to make me get in trouble with Spencer. I just want to feel his wrist tilt. I'm like, there's no way that dude's going to tilt me like that, but he might. But Spencer's got to get on top of me first.
When you look at wrestling the last 20 years, who's a guy or two that you look at him and you really, really appreciate what they do on the mat?
I like Spencer. I talk to him. I like what he's about, and I like how he wrestles and carries himself too. And especially after what happened last year. But I really like Spencer. How he carries, like I said, just how he carries himself. No, it don't matter how the outcome is either. He's grateful. He takes his wins and losses the same. And a lot of guys don't do that now, but we're seeing more and more of that. But you got to take your wins and your losses the same.
What do you remember from your early days in the room at Michigan State? You redshirted, correct?
Yeah, twice. I took an Olympic year in 2004.
Yes. When you got into that room as an 18-year-old, what do you remember from that time?
Freaking not being how to get off bottom. That's the biggest difference. And learn how to do that. Because, how we were out of high school. I was never on bottom. I never had to learn how to do it. But in college, you got to know how to do it. And to not get off bottom and just get suffocated like that, it's miserable. So after my second year, my redshirt freshman year, that was my goal, to figure out how to get off bottom. I wasn't worried about my feet. I wasn't worried about top wrestling. My goal was to get off bottom. And I think my second year, my redshirt freshman year, because I lost 20 matches in college. 12 were my freshman year because I couldn't get off bottom.
What do you learn? I mean, what do you learn to get off from on bottom? How would you describe?
Just keep putting tough guys on top. Like when we were wrestling top bottom, you were getting on top of me. I wasn't getting on top of you. I didn't need to work on top. I needed to work how to get off bottom. I forced myself to do it, even though it was miserable. Like I said, Coach Chandler, he was a bear on top, I put him on top of me. I'm like, Roger, I got to figure this out, so get on top of me. Whoever, if I knew they could ride, I'd put them on top of me. And if I get out or reverse them, I'd go right back down and figure it out. I was determined to figure out how to get off bottom because I wasn't going to lose that way.
Did you ever get discouraged? I'm assuming you probably did. I mean, with your high school career, you dominate everybody. You're on the mat. What did you tell me? 3 matches that went 6 minutes in your career, over 200 matches. What how did you deal with being in a place you weren't used to? You were getting whooped on a little bit. That was unfamiliar territory for you. What do you remember? How did you persevere during that time? Looking back on it 20 years later, what do you reflect on and appreciate?
It was uncomfortable, like you said, you're not used to that. I hadn't lost in 5 years. The first loss I took was to Dubuque at high school nationals, in the semis and overtime. But it was uncomfortable being in that position and not used to doing it, So just a lot of talk, just, the coach, like with Chandler and Chris or my parents and Terry and my brother, just leaning on people to talk to. And he's like, what got you here? Go back to what you do and don't worry about anything else. The way you wrestle and the way you compete, it'll take care of itself. But just stay true to what you do, because it's humbling. And I'm a competitor. I don't like to lose. So you're just don't. It happens, But sometimes you take a loss. Freaking only Kale's the only one that hasn't.
Yeah, isn't that something? I mean, this sport will humble everybody.
Eventually.
So your redshirt freshman year, you were third at the Big Tens, seventh as an All-American.
Yep.
You made the
in Kansas City.
In Kansas City. What do you remember from being on the podium? What was most rewarding about that season?
We beat that season, my freshman year, we beat Iowa and Michigan in the same weekend. And we hadn't beat Iowa in 20-some years. And I majored Luke Eustis, who was a returning national finalist. I think I beat him 10-0 or something like that. And I spladled him twice. And then we beat Michigan. I think we beat Michigan on Friday and then Iowa on Sunday, or vice versa. But that was one of the bigger highlights. We were one dual meet away. If we would have beat Illinois in our duel, we would have been Big Ten dual champs. But myself and Gray Maynard both lost in the duel. And one of us needed to win.
You lose to Ott?
No, Juan Pham.
Who's that?
Juan Pham.
Okay.
No, the only time Ott ever beat me was in the NCAA semifinals.
Okay.
I beat him in the Big Ten finals twice. And I teched him in the dual meet.
So why didn't it work for you in the semis? Like, you had a great career, Nick. So 3-time Big Ten champ. And then at the NCAA tournament, you're 7th. And then you go, what, 3rd?
4-4-3.
4-4-3.
All in the semis. I lost in the semis 3 years in a row.
What happened? Like, when you look back in that and you dissect it, like, what happened?
I'd like to think it was bad calls the first one, but I put myself in those positions, and all the guys that beat me in the semis never beat me to the semis. Like Coleman Scott beat me in the semis our senior year, and that was the only time he beat me in college.
So I'm sure this is something you probably thought about, right?
Hey, guess what? I lost in the semifinals at Worlds too.
Like, how do you explain
all that shit's in my head?
How do you explain that?
And the guy that I lost in the semis at Worlds, I pinned him the month before in Poland. So those semis, I never lost those guys to the semis.
I mean, sports psychology now is such a big thing. I mean, did they have that when you were in college? I mean, I'm guessing probably not much.
No, I don't know. It's just a thing. And I think what someone said to me, they're like, dude, you got a semifinal complex. I'm like, no, I have no complex. Leave me alone. But maybe, I don't know.
You think you did?
I don't like to think so, but I'm superstitious though too, so I got to have everything the same. I don't like changing stuff up. Like 3-day tournament, NCAAs, I wear the same stuff. Until I lost in the semis, then I got to change it up. But I wear the same socks, underwear. I'm wearing the same stuff every match.
But the interesting thing is, Nick, it's like once the semis were over, then you came back and earned it on the backside. I mean, 3rd at the Big Tens. You come back in the backside, and yeah, you lost the 3rd place match a couple of times, but you made the 3rd place match 3 times. So, yeah. I mean, that says a lot about you too. I mean, when I look at your career, it's pretty interesting. Like, it just, that's why I'm asking you, like, beats me. I mean, it's just, it's pretty unique. From dominate, you get to the semis, you get a tough loss, and then you pull it back together and you have a pretty good finish.
Right. I'm like, there's no way I'm not getting back into that. I'm not doing the semi-slide. I'm telling you that. I'm not going down to 5th and 6th. But it's just having to regroup and pull yourself together and just wrestle, because the worst thing is coming off that loss.
How do you pull it together?
Especially 3 years in a row when you're the top seed. Top 2, I think it was 1-2-1 my sophomore, junior, senior year.
How did you do it? Like, how did you pull it together? Because I'm, Tyler Kasak of Penn State, true freshman, loses in the first round, wins 7 straight. I mean, I will continue.
That's a long way back. That's a long way back.
There is so much honor there is so much honor in showing up on the backside when it's easy to hang your head. Your dreams are crushed. You feel sorry for yourself. It's such an easy time to quit. And it's easy for me to sit here and talk about it, but it blows me away. I said this, Nick, and I want to start this next year. There's the champions picture, and that's awesome. I want a picture of the third place finishers because I just think it takes guts, grit, heart. It takes some big time stones to take third place. How did you get it together after those devastating losses? What did you do?
Well, it helped too, because I had my brother there doing the same thing. My brother lost in the semifinals twice to Nate Gallick both times. His senior year, he tore his hamstring off the bone, or he would have been in the finals, champ. But you never know. But, it just, I had him to lean on. We were both in it together. So that helps, But it just pride. Just pride. I'm not going to do that. I'm not, it sucks. But you got a man, like you said, you got to nut up and you got to do it. It is what it is. You think that guy's happy being there too? But he didn't just come off a loss though. He maybe rattled off 7 wins or whatever to get there. But coming off the loss when your heart broke like that, it's different. It's different, especially your senior year when you're the number 1 seed and you already beat both finalists. It's humbling, but just the pride.
It's amazing the emotions of that tournament because you bring up a really good point. You're coming off a semifinal loss. You're crushed where you got a guy that maybe lost in the first or second round, but he's had a chance to heal. He's won a few matches. He's quote unquote healed up from that initial loss where you're coming off. It's what I would say a pretty deep wound and you got to get it together. When you look at your career, Nick, and these might be 2 different matches, what's a match that was the most, I'll start with this. What was the most painful loss of your college career, the most painful one?
Definitely losing in the semis, but the one that always rings the most, losing in the semis, because when you should have been, in my mind, couple-time national champ or whatever, making the finals at least. I tell you what, feel bad for you don't ever want to be the guy that's the best that's never won. I hate that title. Me and Hazewick will freaking talk about it all the time. But one of the most painful is I got pinned once in college. I got hit with a cement mixer at home in a dual meet. The only time I've ever been pinned. You want to talk about humbling?
Who pinned you?
Chris Rodriguez.
Where's he from?
He was rough. He went to U of M. I think he's from Georgia, but he went to U of M, and then when he beat me, he beat me. He was wrestling for North Carolina. We get stuck at home. They're like, came back out, watched the team, did what I did. Then I went off by myself and ate dinner that night by myself. They're like, you good? I'm like, I'm good. I just need to be by myself. That's it. Leave me alone.
What loss in your career in college taught you the most?
Oh, man. I'd say the ones that taught me the most, like I said, like going back from earlier, it would be my freshman year. Just not knowing how to get off the mat. That's what taught me the most. And which is the most humbling when you have no say on how you're getting off bottom. And someone else is just holding you down. That's really frustrating for me. That would just not anyone in particular, just be whatever my freshman year, learning how to manage my weight, co-weight properly. Like I said, learning how to get off the mat.
Whether it was college or in your freestyle career, what's the most impactful conversation that you ever had with a coach or a teammates that really steered you in a certain path or to a certain path or down a certain path?
It would have been, like you said, you have a lot, even, in my freestyle career when I was training was Zaleski, Steiner, Roberts out there, just different insights. But, just the true people will hold you accountable and tell you, they'll call a spade a spade. And that's what I like to think I do with my athletes. I'm out here in the UFC with Buckley this weekend, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. I'm going to tell you what you need to do. Whether you do it or not, that's up to you. But, and we had that around us because we were home, and with our coaches. And it just would have been, going back to my freshman year when I wasn't used to losing. Like, you'll be fine. You'll figure it out, but just keep doing what you do.
You got
It's not like, go ahead.
You got a conversation, Nick, that stands out that was difficult? Like, I'm out because this sport is so hard. There's upside. It's life in general. There are times where, making good decisions, doing the right things. There are times where not. I'm just always fascinated by this stuff. Like, do you recall a time in your career where difficult conversation had to be had that stands out to you?
Not too much, just not with that I can recall, like, that was like super difficult. It was more me being harder on myself, and then my coaches, our personal coach or whoever, my dad or my brother. Me and my brother had these, we'll have these conversations of what's going on, and we can talk to each other about anything.
Three-time
I
Big
don't have
Ten
like I don't have like a specific thing in mind that was like that sticks out.
Okay. Three-time Big Ten champion, four-time All-American Nick Simmons joining us here on the Going It podcast. When you look at your career, Nick, give me a time when your back is against the wall and you had to find something you didn't necessarily know you had at that moment, when you really had to go earn it. When was that time for you in your career?
Oh, probably the first time I beat Hayeswinkle was one of them.
When was that? Give us the scene.
It was actually in Oklahoma, because Andy would always wrestle Tion and I'd wrestle Sam, right? But all four of us were undefeated in high school. So beating Sam in Oklahoma for the first time, because he beat me, in the for third and fourth match, and he beat me in the the All-Star meet. To finally break through and beat him, I was like, freaking about time. And I love Sam, but he's annoying the hell out of me. I got to freaking beat him.
What made it? What was the difference in that match?
Just letting myself wrestle. Not thinking too much about it, just wrestling. Like we said earlier, like, okay, if he scores one, I know I'm going to score more, so let's see what happens. And that was the first time I rode him out. He was the hardest guy for me to ride. When I rode him out, I beat him.
Finishing,
he was the hardest guy.
on top.
Yeah, because with his Greco and stuff, his hand fighting, he was hard for me to ride. He was one of the hardest guys for me to ride. Him and Joe Dubuque were the two hardest for me to ride.
Who's the toughest guy you ever wrestled? Just pure toughness. Just a guy that you knew you could beat, but you'd have to go to hell and back 3 times to do it. Just a guy that you knew was just going to be hard wrestling for 7 minutes or whatever the time was.
Oh, I knew, those two, especially those two. I knew I was going to have to wrestle hard for 7 minutes with those guys. Even Joey. But I didn't wrestle Joe that much. We're the same age, but we only wrestled twice. And we're in the same conference, at the same weight, same age. We only wrestled twice. In the one dual meet and in the Big Ten semis. But he was kind of hard too. It's different, The guys that wanted to keep it, the closest were the hardest ones. The guys that will wrestle, I'm like, let's wrestle. The guys that would just try to back their way into a win, those guys are the hardest to wrestle. I don't have like one specific guy. I knew I was going to have like AJ Grant in Michigan. I knew I was going to have to wrestle that dude hard for 7 minutes. He was a competitor. He would wrestle, And we went back and forth, but he was one of the harder guys for me to wrestle.
What did you do from a preparation mentally, Nick? Did that approach change through college, into your freestyle career? Like, what was how did you sharpen yourself mentally as you gained maturity and experience in the sport? How did that change the way you sharpen yourself mentally?
Just the belief and knowing that you're doing everything right to get you where you're at is a big help too, you know. And I still had to even when I made the world team, you know, I was it was the weight cut. The weight cut was my bigger issue. It wasn't the wrestling. It was the weight cut and being able to do it right. So I took sixth at the U.S. Open the year I made the world team because of my weight cut. And Steiner don't get mad at anybody, you know. That dude was mad at me for doing it wrong. I'm like, whatever, just tell me what to do, and we did it. You know. So he was pissed.
And that was Troy, right?
Yeah, it was Troy.
Yeah.
That dude was mad. He don't get mad. You know Troy, he don't get mad. Not like that. You know,
You
'cause
won
people
three-
when you cut weight wrong, they're like, well, he's out of shape. You're not out of shape. You're freaking wrestling every day. It's because you did X, Y, and Z wrong.
And was that just a lack of discipline?
Just thinking I was fine. Yeah, you could say lack of discipline and be like, oh, I got it. Don't worry about it. Or I'll do it like this with these guys. And it wasn't the right way to do it.
You won 3 Big Ten titles. Give me your favorite Big Ten championship memory.
Probably winning one in Carver Hawkeye my sophomore year was awesome. But my junior year, because my brother and I both won back to back, or I was at 25. Then Mac Ryder had like the 9 overtime match at
Him and Tom
133.
Plum, right? Him and Tom Plum. Yes.
Yeah. That took forever, and my brother's sitting there waiting on deck, and these guys are wrestling for an hour straight. Winning us two together was awesome.
And where was that at?
IU at Indiana.
Who did you beat?
Kyle Ott. I beat him my sophomore year and junior year. I think I majored him in my sophomore year in the Big Ten finals, or my junior year in the Big Ten finals at IU.
Outside of yourself and your brother, who is your Mount Rushmore of Big Ten wrestlers?
Oh, Big Ten? Oof. I mean, there's so many good ones, especially man. I mean, and I'm partial too, with Coach Goldman being a 4-time finalist and champ, and Zaleski, guys that wrestled for, and Steiner. I'm partial to all those guys.
It's your mountain. It's your mountain.
My mountain. Let's say I have to go with David Taylor. I think he was fantastic in it, and I mean, even with freaking Brooks and Starachi, those dudes fucking good. Good. I mean, all these dudes are good, but I'll take Jimmy too. Being 3-time champ and 3-time national champ. I mean, good. Put me on the spot, man. We'll say Bo too, because I like the way he competes and how he wrestled.
Yeah, always exciting. Another guy that could just let it fly, had the freedom.
Just don't know what's going to happen.
Take some big chances and risks, and normally came out on the better end. An amazing career.
Yeah, I mean, like T.J. Williams growing up, he was one of my favorite wrestlers.
He might be.
Joe Williams.
Oh,
they were freaking my favorite growing up.
T.J. Williams, in my opinion, is the best wrestler that doesn't get talked about as much as he should. Nearly as much as he should.
Dude was good.
He was off the charts good.
Yup. They were my favorite to watch growing up, when they were in college and we were growing up through it. I'm like, this dude's good.
What separates good from great?
Mentality. Like, I'll use, like my mentality. I'm going to pin you, but if I don't pin you, we're going to tech you because I'm working on turning you all the time. And then, if you don't get tech, I'm going to major you because I'm still scoring points. So it makes it harder to lose when you have that mentality. It's about mentality and wanting to do it, put that work in.
Describe making that world team in 2011. Knocking on the door, you finally bust through. What do you remember from that tournament that night?
Oh my God, dude. So many emotions. Not being able to be in the NCAA finals, not winning it, then finally making the world team. I will remember when I was walking off the mat to go back and take the USADA test, the drug test. Walking up and seeing Joel Heskett walk at me and just freaking like I'm pretty much crying. He just gives me the biggest hug. I'm like, dude, finally, I get my opportunity. One of the bigger things. I mean, I had all my people there, my support people there, but I remember, with Troy with Troy Steiner and Pasco in my corner too, like actual coaching me during that match, and it was in Oklahoma in freaking Hayeswinkle's back door, just winning it there too on top of it. But it was just a relief for me.
When you reflect on your wrestling career, Nick, what are you most proud of?
Just being an entertainer.
What's
I want
your
people to enjoy. I want you to enjoy watching me wrestle, whether you like me or not. I don't care.
What do you think is your most entertaining match of your career? You got one that stands out?
Me and Cejudo in the semifinals at Olympic team trials.
And that was inside Carver, correct?
Correct. No one else was wrestling. It was just us too. They stopped calling matches to the mat. Just scoring points, and he let it fly too. Let's see who scores more. That was one of my favorite matches to be a part of.
You've been into coaching as well, Oregon State, Indiana. You run a club. What have you learned from coaching? What are a couple of things that you've learned coaching that have been, really instrumental in your philosophy?
You can't coach everybody the same. This guy's not the same as that guy. You don't realize it really too much while you're competing. You're like, well, why is he not doing this? Because I'm doing this. The specific. Every two people is not the same. This guy might need a couple different other things on the other side over here that you don't need, but you need to do this instead. I don't treat everybody the same. Some people you got to talk to differently. You can be harder on, and then who you can't really be harder on.
If you could go back, Nick, in your career, what's something, if you could have a conversation with yourself as an 18-year-old, and I know you mentioned the bottom wrestling, what's something else that if you could go back and talk to an 18-year-old Nick Simmons today, what would you have told him?
Be coachable.
So you weren't, you
no,
feel
not that I wasn't that like you wouldn't tell. You just got to know that other ways do work. Be open-minded. I mean, you figure it out. I mean, I figured it out. I mean, not that I wasn't coachable. You could tell me to do anything, I'll do it. I'll run through that wall if you tell me to do it. But it's just being more open-minded and like positions you're not used to, or you're like, well, I'm not going to do that. I would never do that. But at least learning it, it in the back of your head that you know how to do it now. If that makes sense. That's what I mean by the coachable side of it. Like some people don't want to hear anything you have to say, but I'm just saying in different positions for myself and learning how to do that. I didn't know how to hand fight really until I started training for the Olympics after 2007. Once I started figuring that out, it changed everything for me. I'm like, I'm not going to hand fight like that. I'm not a grinder. Then you figure it out. It actually helps with your positioning and everything else too on top of it.
Finish this sentence in regards to wrestling. I believe. What do you believe when you look at wrestling? What is something you believe?
Oh, that's the greatest sport. There's nothing harder than wrestling. That's what makes it fun. It's not more enjoyable than just getting your hand raised. But it's only for like 10 seconds and you got to get back in it again.
I always say at the Big Ten tournament, the hard is what makes it great, right? I mean, it's hard, real hard.
Yep. Oh, yeah. I was standing next to Jason Bryant when the national anthem was playing a few years ago. I think it was in Philly. That's the best warm-up song because that means it's time to go out there and start kicking some butt.
Absolutely.
That's where you start getting the chills when the national anthem's playing. Now, whatever you're listening to, that's the song that freaking I'm like, all right, it's go time.
Especially as the first guy to go, right? I mean, when you wrestled, you were first all the time.
Oh, I love being first all the time. We could draw then too, you know, but it started to be able to by the end. I'm like, I want to go first. I'm used to going first. I want to go first and get it done and then be able to relax. I don't want to wait 2 hours to wrestle. I'm like, so let's do this. I wanted to start the dual meet off right. You know, I did in high school. I'm going to go out there, get the pin, start us off right, and hopefully get the ball rolling.
Yeah, momentum, right? Always throw that first punch, right? I mean, that's what you did. You set the tone.
Especially with me and Andy back to back, you know. So let us help start it off, and then let's go, guys.
Final question for you, Nick. You've talked about Andy several times. What's your favorite thing about him?
Izzy Martinez said it once too. He's the best guy without the accolade, the title, the NCAA title or world team. I mean, he was, you know, junior worlds and stuff, but that dude, if he wasn't my brother, I bet he'd freaking put it on me. It's a good thing I'm the big brother, though. That dude is so freaking good and technically good. That dude's freaking tough.
What's Andy doing these days?
Our dad owns an elevator company, so we all work for Dad too.
Okay.
Both my brothers and myself. So he's an adjuster for my dad.
I got one more question for you. What is toughness to Nick Simmons? I mean, what does it mean to truly be tough?
Grit. If you go out there and put it on the line and you'll fight for everything, that's tough. No easy points given up. Make them earn it. Because a lot of people just, you know, easy points, you know, front headlock positions or whatever, they'll just give up. You know, not give up, but they'll concede the position to do whatever. Just grit. There's no easy points earned. It'll make your life a lot easier wrestling.
Nick, this has been a lot of fun. Really appreciate it. One more. Actually, Nick, I got one more. I gotta ask you this. I gotta ask you this one. The double knee pads.
Yeah, me and Herbert, baby.
I mean, you made the double knee pads famous. What's the deal with the double knee pads? How'd that begin? Why the double knee pads?
Hated them growing up. How I got my first pair of double knee pads is when I got OW at Tulsa Nationals. They gave you a voucher for attack knee pads. So I sent them in and ordered them, and I never turned back from them. I'm like, oh, these are fantastic. That's how it started. We were against it. I was against knee pads until that moment. Then I never took them off. I mean, when I wrestled at the Greco U.S. Open, I had knee pads. They're just pulled down. I still had them on because it's comfortability factor. I wasn't going to go out there without my knee pads on.
The double knee pads.
Yep.
I keep saying last question, but I got one more. This I promise again. Give me the best. Of course, talk about the spladle, and maybe that's the answer to this question. But give me a match. Maybe it was a takedown. Maybe it was a turn. Do you have in your mind, like, this is the best move I ever had in my life? You've wrestled hundreds of matches. It's probably impossible to think of, but is there a move you hit at some point that you'll remember until you're 90?
Yeah, obviously the spladle, just because it's the spladle, you know, and hitting it at the Worlds. But breaking the pin record at Michigan State, I hit an outside cradle and I finished it. So I finished an outside crossface cradle with a half too, and I stack you when I do it. It's probably one of the more memorable ones because how I broke the pin record at Michigan State.
Fantastic. With that, I will let you go, Nick. Thank you so much, and I just appreciate the time catching up. This has been great. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you.